you have on this one side this invaluable resource that has worked when it's been done correctly, better than anyone ever imagined. And then you have this pre-existing anti-whistleblower culture. That conflict remains and has not been resolved. And at some point, it's going to tip one way or the other. My fear is that it tips against the whistleblower. My hope and prayer is that we can tip it for the whistleblower. But this is in conflict right now.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us back on the Tax Rep Network podcast. I'm Eric Green. Of course, you probably know that by now. I am joined by my friend, Stephen Kohn. If you don't know Stephen, you will get to know him fairly quickly because I think we're going to be doing a lot together. And so Bradley Birkenfeld, we did a sit down with Lucifer's Banker episode just an episode or two ago. So if you don't know Stephen, let me tell you, and I'm going to try to do this quickly because it's beyond impressive. 38 years of experience, was peer-reviewed by the National Law Journal as one of the top 50 top plaintiffs' lawyers in the United States, the only whistleblower rights lawyer to achieve this distinction. In 2024 and 2025, Forbes named Kohn as one of the top 200 attorneys in the United States. He's a founding partner of Kohn Colapinto. Steve specializes in whistleblower advocacy, helping to change the legal landscape, and in a big way. He represented Brad Birkenfeld, our friend, and won the first $100 million whistleblower award for the UBS disclosures. And those cases, Steve, are still going on. We can get into that. I mean, that is, the government just keeps raking it in. We may have to sue them. You may have to sue him again, but we can get into that too. He won landmark cases under the False Claims Act, Dodd-Frank, AML, FCPA, Commodity Exchange and Tax whistleblower laws, and currently represents the Danske Bank whistleblower who reported and helped stop the largest known money laundering scandal, $230 billion. Kohn helped draft key transactional whistleblower laws, including Dodd-Frank, Sarbanes-Oxley, and the AML law. In 1988, he helped found the National Whistleblower Center, where he currently serves pro bono as chairman of the board. He's the author of the first legal treatise on whistleblowing and is the world's most published author on whistleblower protection. I have his 8th book, Rules for Whistleblowers, a handbook for doing what's right. You can grab it on Amazon, everyone, but it is a very comprehensive guide of everything that you need to think about, including retaliation. So, Steve, thanks for taking the time. It took a little while to get the schedule arranged, but I'm glad we can actually do this sit down.
Great. Eric, thank you so much. And it's a real honor to be on your extremely well-respected podcast.
Thank you. But it's folks like you who actually make it that way because, what's funny, when I started the podcast, you go back to the earlier episodes, it was just me venting. What to do when the auditor's batshit crazy. And I was doing a talk with, at the time, the head of collection policy for the IRS, Paul. And Paul said to me, after we do this, we should do it on your podcast. And I was like, you listen to the podcast? He said, a lot of people at the IRS listen to it. He said, it's good to hear what you think unfiltered. So I mentioned it to my law partner, Jeff Squires, and Jeff's like, all right, well, note to self, be careful what you say on the podcast because they're listening. But I've had the commissioners come on. It's a great forum for discussing important things like what we're going to talk about, which is we have a new whistleblower. We have a draft act that we hope is going to become law. It's been kicking around for a while. So, Steve, how did you end up getting into defending or helping whistleblowers?
Sure. So back in law school, 1982, I did a clerkship at an organization that was helping government whistleblowers. When they offered me the clerkship and they said, oh, you'll help whistleblowers, my comment was, what's a whistleblower? I had no idea. But I got there, and by coincidence, they were all government. A corporate person came in, and I figured out what to do for this person. There were almost no laws. And then they offered me a job, and I started doing corporate whistleblower law. That was my focus. I've done a lot of government cases too. That was 84 full-time all the way through. And what's fascinating about this whole area is when I started, the legal landscape was like zero. None of the laws I do now existed. The False Claims Act wasn't there, IRS, Dodd-Frank, nothing. Whistleblowers were being pounded. But I had this philosophic belief that, like, we can't lose because even if a whistleblower loses their case, the public and Congress will see that these guys were doing the right thing. The laws didn't work. Let's make them better. So we really watched this progress from an absolute barren landscape where the whistleblower was pretty much guaranteed to lose, but people would still raise a voice, to now with what I call the supersonic whistleblower laws that are the absolute best in the world. And if employed properly, and if supported by the government agencies that are supposed to support these laws, it can be more effective than I think most people realize.
Yeah, no, I think, and by the way, in reading and, so I started helping whistleblowers who came forward, and I literally just deal with IRS. I'm a tax guy, that's my sole focus. But the actual original whistleblowing case started in the Civil War. It was actually soldiers about the treatment of British soldiers, not the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, which I thought was fascinating. It is a really interesting area, and what has been very disheartening is the response from the government. You bring this case, and we can get into that, but from my perspective, so you start doing these cases. How did you get involved in actually the legislation? Because you seem to have been involved in almost all of it.
So, as I said, it was bad news. The first case we actually won in terms of getting someone reinstated was an atomic weapons plant where there was no law. Literally, the guy got fired. There was no law, but we got him reinstated through congressional pressure, news media, and literally because the guy was righteous. And it just put tremendous pressure on the Department of Energy to reinstate this guy, to DuPont and the contractors. So we saw right from the get-go, we needed better laws. So that's why when you say we started the National Whistleblower Center in 1988, that's really been our arm ever since, our public policy arm, where we, the lawyers, can easily identify weaknesses in current legislation, but also we can pinpoint the precise changes that are needed. So we're not some like policy group that wants to do a good law. No, I guess we are that anyway. But what we bring to the table is we can say this word needs to be changed, this provision needs to be added, or this law needs to be passed. But when we construct it, our sole mission is that we win cases under it. So we're not interested in legislative victory. We're interested in laws that will work in practice. And guess what? Our supporters on the Hill like that. They come to us all the time saying, how should we do this? What provisions need to happen? So many of the laws we've helped them with has been by invitation of the responsible committees, or when we've gone up there, we have the respect because, we're not BSing around. We've got clients, we've got really great whistleblowers who need protection. And it's been our philosophy from day one that Congress needs to do their job. And that's how it unfolds. And that's why we have these better laws. The other thing is, as you use a law, you see the weaknesses and then you can amend them going up. And the AML is the perfect example. They passed a whistleblower law for AML in 2021, but it was
Explain.
discretionary. In other words, you didn't have to get paid. And so we went to the Hill and said, look, it's discretionary. It won't work. And 2 years later, they made it mandatory 10 to 30%, set up a fund. And again, it wasn't like passing a new law. It was pointing out that if you want the law to work, you have to do that. Running ahead, and I'm going to predict your question, that's exactly what we're doing now with the IRS whistleblower law, a law with tremendous potential, but it's been crippled by various administrative and bureaucratic roadblocks. We know what they are. We got to fix it.
One of the big frustrations, I mean, if you look at the case law, and again, I'm just focusing on the IRS one. If you look at the case law, they have complete discretion. They can do the case, they may not do the case. And that has been one of the big frustrations is you bring a case and look, I mean, for every 10 cases, 10 calls we get, we will maybe take one. And the reason for that is either it's not speculative, that we have clients that come to us that have documents, that there is at least third party or independent information that supports what they're saying. It's substantial. I had a great fraud case, but the tax might have been $8,000. And they were very upset, but I told them, I'm like, they're not going to do it. Even if they do it, you're looking at $800, maybe 10%. I mean, it's not worth pursuing. But where we've got really big cases, and I have two of them that are $1 billion or more, we've provided reams of documents. One was the CFO. They seem to have gone into a black hole for years. Now, we're told that's active. One of them is 8 years old. I'm actually convinced the government's never going to do it.
One of the problems with the IRS, it is the black hole of Calcutta, and they don't properly communicate with the whistleblowers. And we even had put legislation through requiring them to communicate. And now you get like a letter once a year and it says, your case is open, nothing else. And then on the bottom of it, it says, if you show this letter to anybody, it's a violation of tax laws. You can go to jail for 5 years. Everything's secret. So it's a black hole of Calcutta, totally frustrating to the whistleblowers. And the average case runs 11 years, which is I call as repeal by delay. It discourages people. It discourages lawyers from taking the case. Even in my firm right now, if we take on a tax case, it's 11 years out. Who's still working here? How old are you?
Yeah. Assuming you even get paid.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is they attempted to kill in Circular 230 our ability to do contingent fees. Most of my whistleblowers don't have a budget to pay for this stuff. No, it's sort of like the government saying, yeah, we want whistleblower cases, but not really. So we're going to do everything we can to discourage you from coming in. So,
okay, so just on the other flip side of that, it's schizophrenia. Some cases and some investigators are super good. Some aren't. Within the IRS and in their Office of General Counsel has been a culture anti-whistleblower, which still exists. And we see that in many agencies. There's this essentially a pre-existing anti-whistleblower culture within the federal government. Why? Well, for many reasons, but a lot of the early whistleblower cases were all against the federal government, like Daniel Ellsberg or even the Snowden case, where the government lawyers were looking at whistleblowers as like the enemy. Whereas under these new laws, they're the government's best friend. They're the best informants, the best sources of information. So what you see in many agencies are that the line investigators have realized how important the whistleblowers are. And they have, like on the AML bill, they were quietly endorsing it. When the SEC wanted to implement regulations undermining the Dodd-Frank Act, it was very clear to us that the enforcement people were pushing back on it because they realized how invaluable these people are. So today you have this conflict within the federal government, and sometimes you can be super frustrated. They can issue the worst decisions, treat your whistleblowers terribly. But on the other hand, they can turn around and give them a $50 million or $100 million check and do a great investigation. The goal is the whistleblowers, when people actually study how these laws work and look at the results are phenomenal. I mean, it's like a 300 to 1 or 500 to 1 return on investment. And all the investors, they say this is the most important ever. And if you look at the history of white collar crime enforcement, the whistleblower solves the entire detection issue.
Right.
You have on this one side this invaluable resource that has worked when it's been done correctly, better than anyone ever imagined. And then you have this pre-existing anti-whistleblower culture. That conflict remains and has not been resolved. And at some point, it's going to tip one way or the other. My fear is that it tips against the whistleblower. My hope and prayer is that we can tip it for the whistleblower. But this is in conflict right now.
Well, it certainly seems Congress, at the draft acts that are sitting there, and I want to get into that in a moment, seem to have bipartisan support. So it seems that both parties recognize this. I just think with all of the other chaos we have going on at the moment, for the last couple of years, it just isn't a priority for them, which
So
which it really should be.
it absolutely should. So we did confronting that very issue. This is really funny. In 2008, when the Democrats won the House of Representatives, they commissioned a poll, objective public opinion poll, to try to figure out what should the priorities of the new majority be. And they had 21 priorities. Coming in number 2 to the top was stronger whistleblower laws. We were in shock. And that House passed some very good laws. And when Obama ran for president, he pledged on a survey to do certain things for whistleblowers, some of which were delivered, and Dodd-Frank came out. We then redid the poll about 3 years ago through Marist, a very objective, respected poll. We let them develop the questions, and we found that over 80% of the American public wanted stronger whistleblower laws. And we also found that statistically, it was bipartisan. That the lowest it went was like 75%. The highest was up to 90%, but never went below like 74%. Republicans, independents, Democrats, rural, city, rich, poor, no education. Like it was amazing because they broke the survey down by all those demographics, every single demographic. Then they asked the question, would it impact your vote, the position on whistleblowing? And 30% said yes. So in point of fact, that's why we can get these things through. When the public speaks out, when things happen, when those politicians kind of look back. But guess what? We can't get a word in edgewise. It's all these much bigger issues. Climate change, right to choose, tax breaks. So we really can't get our message out. We can't push it as hard and as fast as we can. That's why, and as we get into it, we have an action alert program. We have a method to try to mobilize public support to tell the members of Congress to do their job. And that's how we got the AML bill through. It was the funniest thing. It was the last bill of the Congress from 2022, the last bill, which was the federal budget. And we were told it will never get on the federal budget because it's a substantive law. We were told that. Impossible. And we went crazy with our action alerts and everything else we had. We shut down the phone lines. People were yelling and screaming at us. And guess what? It was stuck in the last bill of that Congress, mandatory awards, 10 to 30%. Thank you very much.
So wait a minute. So Steve, that's to explain to the audience. When we say action alert, and I'm going to put a link to in the description because we need everyone to get behind the tax bill. What you do, you're going to click on the link. This is a letter that Steve and his folks have drafted to all of the congressional reps, senators, House of Representatives, all of Congress, that basically says, we want you to get behind this bill and make this happen. It's good for the tax system. It's good for taxpayers. It's what we want. So rather than you having to start looking up who your reps are, come on, guys, you should know. But anyway, for those of you who don't, and starting to draft emails and letters, we're all too busy. Steve and his folks have made this super simple. You literally are going to click the link, put in your information, and hit go. It will hit all of your congressional reps in both houses simultaneously. If we all do this, we are going to bury their inboxes, load up the phones, and it works. It spurs them to do something. You've done this yourself. I mean, you can make Congress tell you no way ever going to happen and then shove the thing in the bill to get rid of you, just
Yeah.
to make it happen so that you shut up and you stop bombarding them because they got other important things to go and drink.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we recognize the power of it over 10 years ago as we've been building our network. And one of the reasons why I'm really excited about this particular podcast and talking to your audience is because a lot of our whistleblower supporters, when they see tax, it's not like they're running to the door. Yet tax fairness and tax cheats should be high on everyone's list. You're now getting to an audience that might understand that and be sympathetic. But just so I mean, we get calls from the members saying, can you please stop it? We're going to do what you want. A lot of the times it's just getting not to do something bad.
Right.
And on this other one, they begged us to turn it off because the chair of appropriations, who is trying to negotiate the federal budget, all of her phone lines got shut down. Her Twitter got shut down. Her emails were clogged. It's like, okay. And what I'm saying is, since we know that there's tremendous grassroots support generically, all we need to do is mobilize that. They know it's out there. They know there's this support. And all of a sudden, when people start calling in, and you don't need thousands, all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's deal with this. So we can get this bill through. It has total bipartisan, and just so you know, all it's designed to do is is to create a mechanism to get the IRS to move faster on the cases.
Right.
There's a double taxation issue that it'll clean up. It's very technical. There's something known as de novo review. So if they don't pursue your case or they deny you an award, you can go into tax court and realistically have a case, as opposed to them just listening to the whistleblower office and denying you pro forma. So it gives due process to those who might get denied. The most important feature is a mechanism to make them move faster.
Right.
And that is the reason why the law is failing. And this bill is laser focused to fix that.
Yeah, no. When I met up with Brad to mention the bill, I literally went back to the hotel and I pulled the bill up. It is kind of a no-brainer. In fact, I think it'll have a huge help. It's going to be a huge help. And so, again, for the audience, if you didn't listen to the episode with Brad or you haven't been on one of my webinars on whistleblowing, Steve mentioned the average to get paid is about 11 years. And that can be the government spends time looking at it. Then they have to pursue it. Then they have to collect the money. Then they could sit around for a year or two deciding what, if anything, they feel like paying you if it's a discretionary award. There's no interest. There's no way for you to compel them to do anything right now. This bill is going to change all of that. It is going to allow us to lean on them to do the right thing and do it faster. It is. It's a no-brainer of a bill. I understand why there's bipartisan support. We literally just need to get them to do it.
And just so you know, your listeners understand is there is no opposition. It has the support of the leadership on the Ways and Means and the other and financial services, etc. They're not against it. No one's against it. It's a question of priorities. It's a question of getting their attention, shaking the tree, and getting someone to pick it up and put it in and make sure it stays. So that's why we're optimistic that we can win, because because there's no opposition, it's really just pushing it over the finish line. It was drafted in a bipartisan way. It was vetted to leadership in a bipartisan way. It's got no opposition. It just needs an incentive to put this forward. And I just also want to add that these cases focus on large tax cheats, offshore accounts, people who often are millionaires and billionaires who are simply ripping off the system because there's no accountability. We already know how big the tax gap is. But what we also know is that when the whistleblower law has been employed properly, it has resulted in the most successful tax cases and pretty much white-collar crime prosecutions in history. So Birkenfeld's case, to just put it into perspective, he did it. UBS got sanctioned $780 million. He gets a $104 million award. There's a meeting in Switzerland of the bankers and their consultants, and they announced that U.S. accounts are over, that they're not going to risk servicing U.S. clients since the bankers in Switzerland can make millions turning them in. And on paper, every known U.S. account was shut down. Of course, some people figured out how to keep them there, but what we know is 50,000 U.S. taxpayers repatriated their money back to the United States, went into the voluntary program, fines and penalties. It all worked out, billions collected. And we know through the follow-up, what happened was UBS triggered it, but because UBS had to turn in names, it's created a snowball, and they were able to start tracking down all these accounts. So pretty much all major and many of the small Swiss banks all pled out. In the background, Birkenfeld then triggered, as you can imagine, many other whistleblowers in many of these other banks. Almost all those cases remain confidential for obvious reasons, especially because a lot of what these Swiss bankers are doing is criminal in Switzerland. Regardless, it created this incredible enforcement. We calculated that $780 million initial fine and the $104 billion payout has recovered over $25 billion through the fallouts.
So
Plus, all that money that was in Switzerland back to U.S. banks, taxed forever. This is the potential. Why are we stifling it by delaying and mistreating the whistleblowers?
are you bringing a suit for my friend Brad for all the rest of the money they owe him? Because they only gave him on that fine. What about all the money they recovered?
All my current cases are
You can't
confidential.
discuss it. I get it. I'll call Brad.
And I'll even tell you this, my largest client ever in the banks, no one even knows there was a whistleblower. The confidentiality rules are so good. And that's one thing the IRS does a good job on. They're like the secret agent. They should just transform into the CIA or something. I mean, they are so good at keeping confidentiality of these whistleblowers to an obsessive point. So, I mean, literally, you can get people being paid $100 million or $150 million. No one knows who they are. And they can even make it that the banks don't even know there was a whistleblower. They're so careful. And so I take my hat off to them for being secrecy fanatics.
No, absolutely. And no, Steve, we are going to be putting together a whistleblower event. I mean, I know you do one. This would just be for the accountants that very laser focused on tax. But just quickly before I let you go, because time is an issue. One, couple things. One, what is the event that you hold? Because you hold, I think, a big whistleblower conference.
Yeah. So July 30, you can write it on down and look for your invitations. Sign the action alert. Maybe you'll get an invitation. We do an event on Capitol Hill that's bipartisan. It's under the auspices of the Senate Bipartisan Whistleblower Caucus, and it commemorates America's first whistleblower law from passed at the height of the revolution on July 30th, 1778, marking 10 sailors and Marines. Their leader jumped ship, went to the Continental Congress in 1777, and blew the whistle on the commander of the U.S. Navy. And in response to that and the retaliation these whistleblowers faced, the U.S. Continental Congress, our founders of this country, passed the first whistleblower law, I think, ever, calling upon every inhabitant of the United States to report frauds and crimes to the appropriate authorities. Not only did they do that, they released all of these documents of the embarrassing to the U.S. government, and because it was the misconduct of the commander, all released, no Freedom of Information Act needed. And I think for the first time ever, and only time ever, the U.S. Congress voted to pay the lawyers for the whistleblowers who'd been charged with criminal libel, were facing imprisonment in Rhode Island. They hired the best lawyers. Samuel Adams was one of the big movers behind the whole enterprise, believing in their rights. And they paid those whistleblowers in those days $1,400, a ton of money. And what's remarkable about it is they voted to pay the lawyers, and they did pay the. We followed this. I pulled out all the stuff from the archives. This is at the height of the American Revolution. We were losing the war. They didn't have any money. Every penny was going to bullets. Yet they decided that setting that precedent, that the American people in this new revolutionary republic would have the right and be defended for stepping forward to report misconduct, was of such significance, is that they wrote the check. And we went to the National Archives to get a copy of the check because it was so unbelievable that and there it was. They wrote it out and handed it to Samuel Adams, who distributed it to the lawyers. And it was a remarkable event. So this, in our view, cements that whistleblowing is part of the American credo. It is part of the revolution. It's what the war was fought over. And we must commemorate that. And that's what goes on July 30th. Come to our luncheon. I hope you can make it.
Oh, I got it on my calendar. And what it does, to get to this, people that act or behave as if they're above the law undercuts everyone's freedom. We're all paying taxes. Why should people not? I mean, the whole system doesn't work. So the whistleblowers, in many ways, keeps our freedom and everything that underpins the concept of America by bringing this stuff to light. I understand why there's no opposition.
And that's the foundation of our republic, of a country of the people, by the people, a country that was dependent upon the people, not just to fight in the revolution, but to fight to make sure the democracy exists. And fight for democracy never ends.
No. All right. No, Steve, thank you. This has been great. How can people get a hold of you? For anyone listening to this who wants to reach out to you?
Sure. So the best place is just come to the website of my firm. Very easy website, www.kkc.com. For Kohn and Calapino.com. Easy. For our activist side, it's also very simple. Whistleblowers with an S.org. That's the nonprofit, the firm, and you can easily get a hold of me. If you just hit that site, it'll have emails and all types of ways to get a hold of us. And please contact us, get involved. We co-counsel cases all the time, and we do like working with lawyers around the country. who maybe aren't experts in this area so we can help co-counsel those cases or consult on them to make them work.
And I'm going to put a link in the description below so that you can go ahead and jump in on that action alert and send the message to all of your congressional reps to back this bill. And let's see if we can get this across the finish line here in 2026.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And thank you so much for having me on and bringing attention to these critical issues.
No, Steve, thanks for taking the time. And it's a big topic. It's a hot topic. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate you sitting down for this.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.